victory. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. See you again tomorrow night. Time now for Banfield.
Happy Summer Monday. And you know that's the last time I can say that, right? Because this time next week, it's not going to be summer anymore. So I'm in a bit of that end of summer blues. I don't know how you feel about end of summer. I'm not big on it. So I'll just muddle through the week, and I hope you'll be with me as I muddle along. I do have some really good stories for you tonight, though. First of all, you know that the Bryan Kohberger story just never fails to deliver stuff that makes you go, huh? Or what? And tonight's is a little bit of both. So do you remember, a while back, his lawyers put out a survey, and they were asking potential jurors all sorts of questions about the case. And some of the questions were fine, but some of them weren't so fine. Some of the questions weren't factual at all, and the judge was pissed. Turns out some of the responses that they got are causing an even bigger stir. Let me give you a hint. Somebody wants to burn down the courthouse if Bryan Kohberger is acquitted. That is never good. There's a hearing coming up this week, and it's really, really important because they're going to decide where he's going to be tried. Is it going to be Latah County? Is it going to be down in Boise? There's a lot riding on this. I'll explain all of it, and I'll give you some of the other responses, too, because they weren't very good either. Then there's this really, I don't even know how to describe it except for crazy story out of Georgia. It's part serial killer, part retribution, part tragedy, part I don't know how to feel about this one. But effectively, a serial killer ended up going to prison only to discover his own daughter gets murdered. And then the wife has to deal with the fact that her husband is in prison. Her daughter was murdered by not that killer, by another killer. And there's a twist in all of this. So don't go anywhere, because you really have to hear about the twist. And you also have to find out why the wife is still married to the serial killer. He's never getting out, right? Anyway, so that's coming up in a minute. And do you watch Dance Moms? It's okay if you watch Dance Moms. You can say it out loud. I have my guilty pleasures below deck, like total addict. But if you're an addict to Dance Moms, I think you've probably heard this story, and you're probably really angry. Because the internet's on fire about something that happened on Dance Moms. This little sweetheart, JonBenet Ramsey, has been gone now for 3 decades. And Dance Moms seemed to think that it was appropriate to recreate her murder in a child's dance routine. Yeah, you heard me. I know. I can't believe, saying that out loud doesn't make you vomit in your throat a little. But apparently the grown-ups on Dance Moms had no problem with it. I'm going to show you some of the routine. I'm going to show you the little girl who was told to do the routine and research JonBenet's murder. What? Here's a hint. If you have to teach a kid to do something that involves them researching a murder, might not be a good idea. Anyway, I'm going to tell you all about that in just a moment. First, I want to start here. If you've ever served on a jury, you know the qualifications are kind of low, right? You don't have to be a legal scholar. Actually, the less you know about a case or about the law typically is better. You do not have to be a mind reader. You don't have to be a people person. You don't even have to be a pillar of the community. You just have to have an open mind. What you can't do, though, is say that you're going to burn the courthouse down if the defendant is set free. And if you can believe it, quote, unquote, torching the courthouse is now in play in the Idaho student murders. It's this doomsday scenario that's being floated by the lawyers who are representing Bryan Kohberger. Those same lawyers who are desperately trying to have his trial moved from Moscow, Idaho, to anywhere else in Idaho, far from the scene of the quadruple murders. Their preference is Boise, by the way, way down in the southern part of the state of Idaho. Here is what they're now suggesting is reason enough to move the trial from Moscow to, I don't know, maybe Boise. you remember the defense team doing that survey, that phone survey of Latah County? It was a while back. They were hoping to prove that the jury that will come from there, the jury pool, is not a good one where the University of Idaho is located in Moscow. That they think that jury pool, all surrounding the campus of the University of Idaho where those murders happened, that jury pool is hopelessly biased, that they couldn't possibly render a fair verdict. They've been living that awfulness for 2 years. So the survey that they did caused a big ruckus because while most of the questions were factual, like, have you ever read, seen, or heard of Bryan Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania, quote unquote. But some of the questions that were asked of these potential jurors in Latah County were not so factual. Like this one, quote, have you read, seen, or heard that Bryan Kohberger stalked one of the victims? Have you, by the way? Did you hear that? Because that was a big rumor. That was all over the internet. But the authorities say Kohberger did not stalk a victim. At least they are not saying that now. And planting that seed into the minds of the possible jurors in Latah County, that was a big no-no for the judge in the case. The judge got actually pretty mad about it. But now the defense team is saying it's worried about the reaction that it got from some of the people that they actually, surveyed, made the phone call. Hello, Mrs. Smith. I want to give you a couple of examples when respondents were asked questions. First, they were asked to predict the community's reaction if Kohberger were found not guilty. And one resident answered that they'd, quote, burn the courthouse down, and that outrage would be a mild description. Another resident said that they would, quote, probably find him and kill him. And still another says, quote, there would likely be a riot, and he wouldn't last long outside because someone would do the good old boy justice, end quote. So they did the survey outside of Moscow, Idaho, and outside of Latah County as well. And by contrast, the quotes that were coming from people in, say, Boise, those were a lot more muted. Like one respondent said, quote, I don't know if there'd be super strong feelings if Kohberger were set free. And then like another quote said, they would go on with life as always. To be clear, there are other options than just moving the whole trial. If you remember Casey Anthony, when she was charged with murdering her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee, that was really big in the news as well. Everybody knew Casey Anthony, Kaylee Anthony, tot mom. And the judge, the lawyers, and the defendant, they stayed put right there in Orlando. But the jury was picked from another county, and they were bussed in, and they were sequestered for that trial. And if any trial should have been moved, a really strong case could have been made for this guy, Alex Murdaugh. When it came to his trial, his family literally ran the low country legal system in South Carolina. Everybody knew them. And most people really feared the Murdaughs, right? There was a portrait of Alec Murdaugh's grandfather hanging in the very courthouse where Alec was tried. But none of it did any good, and he stayed put. Of course, it didn't go well for Alec, right? I am joined now by Shannon Gray. Shannon is the attorney for the family of Idaho student murder victim Kaylee Gonzalez. Shannon, it's good to see you. I haven't talked to you in a while. I wanted to touch base with you about these developments, those incredible quotes that the defense says that they elicited from that survey. What's your gut reaction on learning that?
Well, I mean, I think in any motion that the defense has filed lately, the family really believes it's really a lot of grandstanding. This idea that, there's going to be riots and burning the courthouse down and find him and kill him in mobs in 2024. I think the family feels is just, these motions now that the family feels that they're writing them more for the public than they are really for the defense. And the fact that, you pick and choose out of, I guess, hundreds and hundreds of people that were surveyed, you pick and choose 4 or 5 comments and then, by the way, over here where we want it, there aren't those types of comments. They probably, the idea that they might have picked and choose those kind of comments from the areas that they wanted to is not above someone when they're writing a motion. So.
Also, Shannon, do you think that, look, no matter what, when you have a high-profile case, you're going to get people who, under voir dire, are going to say all sorts of things. Do you think that voir dire is going to be adequate in weeding out any potential, trouble spots, troubled jurors, stealth jurors, people who just shouldn't be on the panel?
Voir dire is one of those things. It's an art. I've had more of 100 jury trials, and that part of the questioning when you're picking the jury, it's one of those things where you kind of have to have a game plan, and you kind of sometimes have to feed them questions to see how they answer things. But a jury will be picked. I don't think there will be any problem picking a jury in Latah County. I found that most of the cases that were the hardest to pick a jury were like simple misdemeanors, like a DUI. How many people have been affected by a DUI or know someone about a DUI? And they already have this complete, utter opinion about the DUI and whether they're driving or they're intoxicated or they had an uncle that got a DUI and got, the judicial system messed it up and, all these types of things. So those are very difficult trials, oddly enough. But how many people are really involved with murder stuff? Not many. It's a handful of people that you might even find on the jury that have someone that, so it is a good point. You're going to find 8 people. You're going to find 18 people in Latah County, and that's where the family wants the jury to stay and for the trial to occur there. So
let me ask you this. I know it is a hell of a drive, right? Right. So if you were to drive, I know that your clients, the Gonzalezes, are from Coeur d'Alene, and if they were to drive to Moscow, it's about a 2-hour drive. If they were going to have to drive all the way down to Boise, that's about, I don't know, 6-7 hour drive. So it would be really arduous for them to take on that travel, to be at trial every day. I don't know if the judge would take that into consideration, but would your clients be okay with the other option, the Kaylee Anthony option, or Casey Anthony option, where the jurors get bussed in from a different jurisdiction? Would they be okay with that choice?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the family just wants, like everyone else, a fair and impartial jury to have a trial. That's all they want. And if you don't think you can find enough in Latah County, you have Nez Perce County that has a huge population, which is Lewiston. You have Kootenai County, which is Coeur d'Alene. All of those are feasible options to pull in a jury pool for this case. And remember, you're just picking, 12 and then 4 to 6 alternates maybe on this case. So if the family feels like that's enough jury pool to be able to pick a jury here in Latah County. So.
Shannon Gray, I always appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, and I hope we're going to talk again soon. I know this is going to be a difficult week for your clients. Please wish them well for me.
Thanks so much.
All right, I'm going to move on to Richard Gabriel, because Richard is one of the country's top trial consultants. He's president of the Decision Analysis Incorporated. He's consulted in high-profile cases, including Casey Anthony's, as well as O.J. Simpson. So, Richard, you know a thing or two about what it takes to pick a jury when everybody and his uncle seems to know about the case. I wanted to get your hot take, though, on what you heard earlier. Some of those quotations that were coming back, according to the defense, seemed pretty hostile to Bryan Kohberger. Is it something to be worried about?
Well, I think, change of venue surveys are done actually to show really what is the community sentiment. It's a very high bar to move a trial out of that distinct county. So they have to show that essentially the whole county really can't be fair, and it's going to be really hard to get that 12, 16, 18 jurors there. So what the defense is trying to do is they're trying to show that there's such a strength of sentiment, so much anger, so much passion in this community against him that it's going to be very difficult for him to get a fair and impartial jury there. So I think they're using these quotes, and you got to look at these surveys really closely. I've done a number of these surveys, and you have to kind of look really closely at how the survey was conducted, how the questions were worded, and then what are they using to do it? Because as Shannon said, if these are just a few quotes, but there's out of 300 jurors or 400 jurors, there's a lot of other quotes that are relatively mild as well. The defense really has to show that the strength of sentiment in this community is so strong that it's just going to be too difficult to get an impartial jury.
And I don't know how they do the math. I mean, I saw these quotes and I thought, one poison skittle makes the whole bowl kind of awful. But listen, I'll just repeat some of these because it's important. It's important to hear these are real answers. I'll burn the courthouse down. Outrage would be a mild description. I'll probably find him and kill him. There would likely be a riot and he wouldn't last long outside because someone would do the good old boy justice. How do you determine? Like, how you're not going to be able to voir dire every member of Latah County. You can only voir dire the pool that comes in, for jury selection. How do you know that you don't have a stealth juror who's not going to give this answer when being asked questions in the courtroom?
Well, if you get a juror like that who does give that answer, they're gone. I mean, obviously, if they've got that strong an opinion, a judge is going to dismiss them for cause challenge immediately. But this is where the jury selection process becomes so important. You've got to have a very strict and a very lengthy jury selection process. We have questionnaires, so you're really weeding out. And this is where the judge doesn't have to make the determination right away. They can actually send out questionnaires, get them back, and find out, you know what, we do have a real problem here. We may have to move this because the questionnaires that we're getting back from Latah County are so prejudicial, so vindictive that we're going to have a hard time, and we may need to consider that. So they can take that initial step first before they make the determination to actually move the trial out of the county.
I have like 30 seconds left, but I got to ask you this. In Casey's day and in OJ's day, we didn't have the internet, right? And it was bad. It was bad how pervasive the feelings were against those defendants. Now we have the internet. Does it make this job harder for judges when they have to determine change of venue?
It does make it harder because not only are people seeing more and they're seeing it on their feeds all the time, but they're also giving opinions on it in terms of chat comments. So it makes it very challenging for the judge and for both parties in the case.
Boy, I hope they get it right on this one because you know what? It's been a long time coming. We're not even at trial yet. And these families they've just been tortured by this whole thing. I hope you'll come back again, Richard Gabriel. It's nice to see you.
Good to see you too, Ashleigh.
All right, still to come, a Georgia man kills 5 people in the 1970s, including his own accomplice. 20 years go by and he's never caught. Instead, he ends up suffering a worse fate, his own daughter vanishing without a trace. Imagine the scenarios going through his active mind. And before her fate is finally revealed, his serial killing past catches up with him. It just is an incredible story, told by the serial killer's wife, the missing woman's mom, who is live with me next. Melissa Dawn Wolfenbarger hasn't been seen or heard from since Thanksgiving of 1998. It was on that day that she told her mother, "I love you," in a phone call. And no one, except for Melissa's killer, knows for sure what happened to her after that. She was just 21 when she disappeared. She was already married, though, 21, but already married with 2 kids. And she had a husband named Christopher Wolfenbarger, who never reported her missing, even to her own family. That's odd. The following spring, a severed head was found in a trash bag near the couple's home in Atlanta. But somehow, and this part is just bonkers, the authorities made a terrible mistake and they identified the remains as male. A few months later, 2 legs, an arm, and a foot turned up elsewhere. And again, don't ask, no link was made to Melissa until 2003, almost 4 years later. And this is where the connection is strange. That moment where they figured it out was when Melissa's father walked into a courtroom and pleaded guilty to 4 murders. Eventually, he'd plead to 5. All of those murders happened in the 1970s. Melissa's was not one of them. So we've got Melissa missing. We've got the skeletal remains that they misidentify. And then we have her dad walking into court saying, I'm a killer, 4 times over, eventually 5. That father, Carl Patton Jr., became known as the Flint River serial killer. And he's serving multiple life sentences in a Georgia prison as we speak. After DNA evidence finally put him away for life, he asked the detectives to use that same DNA science to maybe solve Melissa's case. And they did. The authorities did just that. But even though they solved the fact that it was her, that skull and those remains were actually not a guy, they were Melissa, it still took them more than 20 years to arrest her alleged killer. And earlier this month, Melissa's husband was booked into the Fulton County Jail on 1 count of murder. Melissa's father, the serial killer, was never considered a suspect, and police aren't saying what it was that led them to charge his son-in-law after all this time. But I am joined now exclusively by Norma Patton, Melissa Wolfenbarger's mother. Norma, thank you so much for being on with me. How did they finally make the link? Do you know anything about the connection to ultimately and finally arresting Melissa's husband, Christopher?
Well, I don't know exactly how they made the final decision to make that arrest. I just not given that information. Yes, it has
not
been.
Yet, but
it's been a long, hard road.
It sure is. Yeah, and it's really crazy. The fact that he did not report her missing, even to you guys, like that would be the biggest red flag. Did you have your suspicions early about him?
Oh, yes, from day one, as soon as I realized she was missing. She had asked for a particular thing for Christmas, and it wasn't something that I could go to the store and buy. She wanted a picture of her with her grandfather. So this was something I had to look through picture albums and find a good picture, and I took it and had it blown up into an 8x10 and framed and wrapped up for her to come get it Christmas. And then Christmas, when there was no phone call, no come into the house, then I immediately panicked and got worried. And it took me months to get Carl on board with that. You know, and actually he really didn't get on board with it until my birthday rolled around, and there again, she didn't call.
So I'm curious, Norma, was his string of murders, you know, those are out there in the ether, and you've got this other crisis looming with your daughter missing. But months and months went by, and almost a year before you yourself reported her missing. What was it that kept you from going to the police about Melissa's, situation? Was it because Carl had his own issues and was headed to prison? No, that had absolutely nothing to do with it. It boiled down to the police not willing to take a missing persons report because she was over 18. Of course, she was 21. She was married. So, you know, it wasn't my responsibility, really, to report her as missing. And they don't like to take those reports from a family member. I mean, that was my trouble. It wasn't that I wasn't willing. Right? Yeah, right. Like a family member can certainly get police on board to say, I'm not getting any answers from my daughter, and my son-in-law won't talk to us about it. I'm getting nervous. Someone needs to do a welfare check. Are you saying the police wouldn't even do that?
No, No, they would absolutely do nothing. And the way I got it reported was going through my local county and taking the cards and the letter and pictures that she had brought to me and left to prove to them that she stayed in contact with me. You know, she didn't just not call me on any sort of regular basis. And at that time, she didn't have a residential phone, so she was limited about when she could call. Cell phones weren't even popular back in 1998, so.
Wow. I mean, it's shocking that you couldn't get any action for, a year from the police when you hadn't had a chance to, connect at all with your daughter. But stay right there, if you will, Norm. I've got so many more questions for you. Coming up, how a serial killer's arrest leads police to solve the disappearance of his own daughter. Could losing a child to another murderer change the heart of a cold-blooded killer? His wife is still with me. She says yes, and she has stayed married to him through it all. We'll continue our conversation after the break. After 26 years on the run, a Georgia man named Carl Patton Jr. was convicted of a string of murders in the 1970s. They were known as the Flint River murders. And Carl Patton's wife, Norma Patton, was the state's star witness against him, for good reason. She admitted to helping her husband dispose of bodies and other evidence. And in exchange for testifying against him and putting him away for life, she was given immunity and she was given a promise that police would help find the couple's daughter, Melissa Wolfenbarger, who'd vanished more than 4 years earlier. They matched the serial killer's DNA to some body parts that were found in Atlanta back in 1999. Back then, the body parts were ID'd as male, but they were not. They belonged to a female. They belonged to Melissa, the serial killer's daughter. But still, the case went cold for years until this month when police announced the arrest of Melissa's husband, Christopher Wolfenbarger. Norma Patton, Melissa's mom, says it has been an excruciating ordeal for both her and her husband, even though he's serving several life sentences in a Georgia prison for murdering 5 people. Norma is back with me now. Norma, do you know what your husband Carl's reaction was when he was in prison and he got the news that Melissa had been murdered, and then got the news that Melissa's husband Christopher was arrested for it?
Well, he was devastated when he found out she had been murdered, but he was deliriously happy as soon as he found out Chris had been arrested. Someone from the DOC actually went down to the prison to tell him personally, or he would not have found out until later in the week. And he was just jumping up in joy and called me as soon as he could get to the phone. As soon as they turned the phones on, he called me to tell me that he knew.
So I'm sure you can understand that there might be people watching right now who might not sympathize with your husband, Carl, right? He took the lives of 5 people, and those 5 families are feeling that heartache that you feel. And they might not sympathize with you either, right? Because you were an accessory afterwards.
Right.
You had helped him, and you admitted to that. How do you process that? Do you understand how people might not feel sympathetic to you or Carl for having lost your daughter? They might just say, gosh, that's karma.
Well, I imagine some people will think that, and I guess to a certain extent, that's probably true. But there again, it just showed us what we put the other families through, and nobody deserves that. Those families didn't deserve it, and we don't deserve it either.
Do you think Carl has changed because of it?
He changed long before he got locked up for the murders. He changed almost immediately as soon as it was done in the 70s. He had already changed, and he's changed even more since he's been locked up with having to deal with the situation with Melissa and her death, and not being able to go to the cemetery and put flowers on the cemetery for his daughter. I'm the only one, along with my daughter, her older sister, or can do that. We go to the cemetery on a regular basis. And we went to the cemetery last week and shouted out to her that we got him.
Do you, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes. Do you think about the family members of the victims of Carl, of your husband, and the family members of the victims of your actions as well? Do you think about them and want to reach out to them because you now understand exactly the pain that they're going through?
Well, I really don't have any way of doing that, and I really don't feel like they would want to really hear from me about it, completely. So, I mean, I'm not interested in hearing what Chris's family has to say about what he did to Melissa. I'm just, he did it. I know he did it, and I knew from day one that he did it. So, and I'm not interested in talking to his family.
Can I ask you this? So many people watching right now, I think, have this question. Your husband, Carl, murdered 5 people. He brought you into it. You committed crimes on his behalf. Why are you still married to him? Because I love him. And we got married in the 60s. And at that time, when you got married, being married to somebody was a big commitment. Today, the kids get married like it's a party time, and then when things don't work out so well, they just get a divorce and move on. And I wasn't raised that way. I lived my childhood with my parents being married, and that's the way I raised my kids. It is definitely a different take on Till Death Do You Part. Norma Patton, I'm very appreciative of this interview. Thank you for being on. Thank you for having me and giving me a chance to explain a little bit about Melissa's case. Melissa's case is a... Well, we'll definitely cover it. We want to cover Christopher's trial as well, so we will call you again. Thank you for this. I appreciate it. Thank you. Still to come, you can't find anything if you don't look. And if you do look, you might find something you never expected to find, like bodies from long unsolved cold cases underwater. A dive team in Florida may have done just that. Missing persons cases dating back half a century. The man who made those murky discoveries is live with me next.
We can all do it. This is not a skilled tradesman job.
Text SMART to 59583 to get your discount code and save up to 50% over real stone.
I have another story of a missing person now from decades ago, and possibly finally some answers. Doris Wurst and her 3-year-old daughter Karen vanished from their home in Florida on November 12, 1974. So we're coming up on the half-century mark since they were last seen alive. The police at the time noted that Doris's 1961 Chevy Impala was also missing. And as it turns out, that old car was the key to solving this mystery. In June of last year, a group of volunteer divers known as Sunshine State Sonar started checking out bodies of water for that very car. And wouldn't you know it, just days ago in a canal in Broward County, they got a hit. They dived down, they found the car, and then something very ominous. They saw skeletal remains of an adult and a small child inside that 1961 Chevy Impala. You know how it goes. It's going to take about 6 to 8 weeks to confirm the IDs through DNA and dental records, but the authorities, they're pretty sure that this is Doris and little Karen. So then the divers, like as if this wasn't enough, they made another shocking discovery in that very same canal. Another car and possibly another long missing person whom they weren't even looking for. I'm joined now by Mike Sullivan, founder and manager of Sunshine State Sonar. Boy, that's a mouthful. Hey, Mike, this is amazing. Like, first of all, congratulations for doing this. And it's the 50-year, the half-century-old mystery is just really blowing my mind. What made you decide to look in that canal?
Well, we just normally we have a team that really picks these locations. Shelley's she's kind of the quarterback of our team, and she researches these cases and really puts us in a position to succeed. We had a whole map planned out in this area, bodies of water. This particular canal was about 4 miles from the mobile home community that she was, known to be residing at the time of her disappearance. And it's just, we usually start where their last known whereabouts is, and we just kind of work out.
I know it's too early to ask this, honestly, but just from what you saw, the position of the car related to the shore, is it likely this was an accident, that she just accidentally ended up in the body of water, or maybe a murder-suicide, or maybe a murder? Like, is there any way to tell, or are the police saying anything?
We're pretty sure it was an accident. It was a pretty common thing to happen back in the day. Guardrail safety is not what it is today. Just talking to the local residents that lived in that area, several of them came out. They were living there back then in the 70s, and they told us there was no guardrails on Broward Boulevard. And it was a quite common occurrence. The vehicles would crash into that canal. So it's not something that's extremely uncommon in South Florida. It does happen.
From what I understand, you looked in the car and you saw a briefcase or a purse. It turned out to be a Fisher-Price toy, which, would make sense if Karen was just 3 years old. When you saw those two figures, that had to be really hard. Even in the work you're doing, it had to be really hard to see a little child of 3 years old, potentially.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a lot different when a child's involved. And, getting that toy out of the back seat of the car was kind of like, to us, it was almost like baby Karen speaking to us like, I'm here. You found me. It was a very emotional moment for me and my brother that were diving on that vehicle. And it's definitely something that's going to stick with me for a long time. And yeah.
Well, I just want to make sure our viewers understand that, you found another car in that same canal. It was a Buick LeSabre. Turned out the plate belonged to World War II vet Bernie Novick, missing since 2004, so 2 decades. And then 5 days earlier, you found an 18-year-old who'd been missing. That's 4 finds in 1 week. So I'm just going to say it on behalf of the audience, thank you. But I also have to know, what is it that drew you to do this work?
Yeah, well, first of all, we have a whole team. It's my brother, Shelley, Demetrius, and Aaron. And so we just have an awesome team of dedicated people. We do this part-time. I mean, we're mothers, fathers, parents, business owners. We go out once a month and do this. We spend our own money to do it. We have a GoFundMe account that's, we take in donations here and there. But for the most part, our volunteers, our small team of volunteers funds this whole thing. We love doing it. And we do it for the families. It's all about bringing closure and answers to these families. And that particular morning, that vehicle actually wasn't in the same canal. It was in an apartment complex about a mile to the east of that canal. And we had located that vehicle, I think it was around 7-something in the morning. We had started our morning in that apartment complex. When we located the vehicle, we didn't dive on it because at the time, we're looking for Karen and Doris, and we're looking for an older vehicle. And so that vehicle looked newer, so we didn't dive on it. We later went back hours later with the Plantation Police, dove on that vehicle, and we obtained the license plate number. The Plantation Police confirmed.
You're amazing. Call us the next time you find something. I'll tell the viewers it's Sunshine State Sonar. So look that up in the GoFundMe. Yeah. I appreciate it, Mike. I hope to see you again soon.
Okay, thank you.
Still ahead, inspiration can come from anywhere, but the program Dance Moms may have just dipped their tap shoes into the worst place ever. They assigned a dance routine about JonBenet Ramsey's murder to a little girl who looked a lot like her.
Someone strangled her?
A 6-year-old. They took her while she was sleeping.
Oh my gosh, this is really not for me, but I'll do anything for the win.
When we come back, how an 11-year-old girl was thrust into the middle of a tragic murder saga, one she can never unlearn. What were the adults thinking? That's next. Far be it from me to squelch artistic expression, but artists, please consider your material and your message, especially if you're enlisting children to bring your vision to life. And I am looking at you, dance moms, specifically Miss Glow, also known as Coach Glow, Gloria Hampton in the Hulu series. On a recent episode of Dance Moms: A New Era, Coach Glow assigned an 11-year-old girl named Ashleigh a dance routine that recreated the story of JonBenet Ramsey, a 6-year-old beauty queen who was murdered in her own home on Christmas Day, 1996.
I want you to research JonBenet. I want you to know all about her, everything about her family, and about her tragic ending.
She got kidnapped and murdered.
It's gonna be hard pulling off as like a beauty queen, but you're also gonna like be pretending like you're strangled. Stop it.
There's been no resolution to this story. She was 6 years old when she was reported missing. Look, 5:52 a.m., the parents noticed that she was missing. There was a note, a ransom note. They found her body. She had died due to strangulation. They were asleep in the house when she was scared. Like, it was very scary.
Someone strangled her?
A 6-year-old. They took her while she was sleeping.
Oh my gosh, this is really not for me, but I'll do anything for the win.
Remember, it's a really sad, tragic story. So you're playing this young child who was put on display, all these pageants, and your parents want this fame and stardom for you, but is that what they really want, is for you to be so famous that her parents somehow couldn't protect her from whatever happened? So I need you to really get in that character and be there and tell that story, okay?
No, you don't need that. Little Ashleigh took the assignment to heart and likely never even knew how inappropriate the ending was in her routine. I want you to just watch closely to what she does with her hands. Understandably, the show faced immediate backlash, and it was especially brutal online. But Dance Moms has been there before. A couple years ago, they based her routine on Anne Frank. But no matter how inappropriate, at least her father